Every question was wrong.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. You're just in the area and thought that you might as well pop by, I guess. For 190. Okay. So the plan for today is to keep talking about pointers, and then well, maybe we'll get to do an example, but maybe not. We'll see how things go. What we were doing last time is we had this struct student22, which had a car name and it had an age, and the car name was an array. Why that's important is going to come up, in about 25 minutes, I know. And what we were doing just before we broke yesterday was allocating a block of student22s using malloc. Is that kind of dark? So, okay. So this was students. And then I think we wanted 5. And we named it actually P block S. Okay, so what does this do? So malloc returns the address of a block where you can store the students. So let's see how that works in Python Tutor. Oh, it's again, I did the 1,000. So let me just redo it with smaller name. Okay. So once malloc has returned this, what we have is we have P block S, which would have some kind of value. So the address. And then over here, what we have is this block of students, right? So all that we store is just this guy. So the address where the first student22 is stored. And then what we have is basically, student P block S at 0, which is 3 characters for the name because I made it be 3. And then an age, and then at the next address, the same thing, and at the next address, the same thing, and so on. Does that make sense? And all malloc returns is just this guy. So all of this structure, that's like an interpretation of what would be in the block. All that you have really is this number in P block S. All right? So, okay. So let's say that we want to change something. So I want to have a function that takes a pointer to the address of the student and sets the pointer to a new address. She will store the students later. So what does this mean? Essentially, what this means is I want to do this, except inside the function, right? So how would I do that? Okay, that was bound to happen eventually. So how do we do that? So we say, okay, create student. And what we want to do is, instead of setting p block s over here, we want to send the address of this guy to the function so that we can change the value of this guy. So that means that we do something like this. And in here, so if we send the address of p block s here, the type is going to be student22 star star. And that means that we'll cancel this out by saying star p underscore block s, so that we'll get to this guy again. And here, I'll just copy and paste this. The question asks for just one. So that's going to be something like this. All right. So in order to call this function, what I would say is something like this, and then create student address of the student. Okay, so this is the usual pattern. The way we're thinking here is, instead of doing it inside main, what we do is we have pstudent. So initially, this is an address that's not kind of any address, it's just random. And then we're saying, send the address of pstudent where I want to store the return value of malloc. Send the address to create student, and inside create student, set the value of this guy to whatever malloc returns. So I think the easiest way to think about it is we're doing basically this, except we want to do it inside the function create student. Yes. Yes. So the easiest way to think about it is you want to change the value of pstudent. In order to be able to change the value of pstudent, you need to send the address of pstudent to the function so that the function can say, go to that address and change the value. So pstudent is of type student22 star. And that means that address of pstudent is of type student22 star star. So let's maybe look at the picture. So we are here. So right now, pstudent is just nothing, right? So eventually you want pstudent to be something that's analogous to this. So here I'm saying, okay, send the address of pstudent. So send this address to create student. So now what they did is they sent the address here to create student. So now inside of create student, I can say, go to this address, meaning go here and set the value here to whatever malloc returns. Right? Yeah.
Alternatively, we could have returned upward, right?
Well, like what I asked in the exercise is not that, but yes, you could in principle say, in a way, just kind of, this would be just like wrapping malloc inside of another thing, but you could say, you know, student22 star. So like something like this. So you could do that, right? So that would be just kind of wrapping the function malloc in this kind of thing that's going to be specific to creating a block of n student22s. Does that make sense? So yeah, you could pass the information this way as well. Yeah. Because that's what the exercise asks is, yeah. So here I kind of made it more general in response to the question, but the exercise asks to create just one. But you could also pass the n and then do whatever size of student22 times n. So, all right. So, call, so that we've already done. So now we want to call the function from Q27 to change the name, right? So we have, if you remember, so I'll just copy and paste this guy to Python tutor. So we've created the student, and what we have now is, you know, start. We have student to start the student. So, sorry, is it of the block? Yeah, it's P block S. So we want to change the name of P block S. So again, one way of thinking about it is just match the type. So P block S is already of type student22 star. So if you do P block S plus 2, that's also of type and like this doesn't always work, but in this case it would. So all we need to say is just change name. Something like this, right? So this is the, well, it's of the correct type. It's of type student22 star because this is student22 star, and then you just advance 2 memory cells forward. Another way of thinking about it is, yeah, like this is actually the address of this is actually the address of the second block. Okay. So all right, let's visualize the execution here. So change name oh, I didn't have. Oh man, it's really not happening. What? So P block. Hold on. Okay. So now we've created P block S. So P block S is this guy, and we can see it over here. And what we're doing here is we're saying change name P block S plus 2. So we're saying this guy plus 2 cells. So we're computing this address. And then we're sending the address of this element to change name, which we've already seen. So after we've run it, here currently somewhere Alice is created, and we're sending strcpy the address of the name here as the destination, the address of the name here as the source, and it's going to copy, this here and so on. There's no space, so we'll change this to. So the reason it crashed before is because I made student 22 have 3 characters, so there was no space for Alice, so it crashed. But there is a space for Mo or something. So now what's going to happen is we're going to copy from this address. So this is the source to this address. This is the destination. And that has happened. Make sense? Are people good with this? Okay. All right. So we now want to create p_p_s to store the address of p block s. Going back. So it's going to be address of p block s. That's just what the question is asking. And now what's the type going to be of address of p block s? Yeah. Yes. You missed one too. But yeah. So that's going to be like this. So why? Because p block s is of type student 22 star. And the address of that is of type student 22 star star. Yeah. Okay. 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 So I think if I understand your question correctly, the answer might be no. So when we're mallocing, and if this doesn't answer the question, maybe we can defer the discussion for later. So when we're mallocing, we're saying, give me an address of a block of this type of variable, right? So if what you're doing is you're saying, I want a block of those kinds of guys, then it's always going to be like this, right? So when would it be the situation that you're returning something of type star star? We'll actually see that later on in the exercises. If you want an array of addresses of student 22, then it would be student 2 star star. Right. So if you want, there is an exercise like that down the road. So maybe we'll get to that. Okay. All right. So, okay. So p_p_s is like this. So address of p block s. So now we want to say, okay, so we have p_p_s. And we want to change the name of the student at the index to Jennifer. So, okay, sorry. So the easiest way to do this is to say, okay, so I know how to do it with P block S, and P underscore S is just the address of P block S. So I can just go back to P block S and do the exact same thing, right? So copy and paste. And instead of saying P block S, I'll say P underscore S. Okay. So here is where it gets a little bit strange, because if you remember from, or like not strange if you think about it, because if you remember from the other day, I had written code that looked kind of like this. Right? And that was valid code too. It wouldn't be valid code over here. So the reason is this is the same as right? So if you have a block of students and you want the second student, this is how you do it. Does that make sense? So if I were to do something like star P underscore S plus 2 with the parentheses, this would be same as but that's not even a valid object, because P underscore S is not, it's not a block. It's just an address of one single thing. It's the address of the variable P block S. So let's look at this by running it. And that already happened. That also already happened. And now we are doing P underscore S is P block S, address of. So that means that we are about to copy this guy over here, right? So, okay. So now if we were to say, I want P underscore PS at 2, then what we would be saying is go to, this address, which is a valid address, and then advance by 2. And then that's just nothing. Does that make sense? So this is kind of a situation where, yeah, like you have to kind of pay attention to this. Yeah.
So here, the star operator happens before the plus 2. Right?
That's right. Yeah, so star has a higher priority then. Yeah. Okay. But this, like, if you think about it, as just, star P underscore PS is just going back to P block S, then it makes sense to the extent that this guy makes sense. All right. So, okay. Okay, in the name of the second student in the block pointed to by PPS, change the first letter to J. Okay, so we have the name of the second student in the block, and then we want the first letter of that. So, okay. So getting in the name of the student at index 2. How can we do it? Well, one way to do it is to again say, I want to go back to P block S. Once I've gone back to P block S, I can just say at 2. So that is the student at index 2. Another way to do it is to say and then star. So that's the same. That's actually the thing that happens every time that you use the square bracket notation, right? Square bracket just means advance this address by 2 and then dereference with a star. So this is just expanding this. Right? So in order to get to the name here, well, what is this? This is a student. So we can say dot name like so. This is, again, a student. So we can say dot name like so. So need to make sure that we first do the star and then we do the dot name. At this point, so what are the other ways that we can do that? So here, what we're doing is we're saying, get me student number 2, and then once you've got student number 2, you're getting the dot name. The other way of doing this is to say, get me the address of student number 2, and then use the arrow in order to get the name, right? So how would that work? You would say, get me the address, or this, yes. So this is the address of the student. If you have the address of the student rather than the student itself, you can use the arrow to get to the name. Right? So that is, again, one way to look at it is just so in a way, this is just the usual way that this guy is going to get transformed. Make sense? So, okay. And there's like more than 4 ways. So what we're trying to do was change the name, the first letter, sorry, to lowercase j. So I just copied and pasted this, and I'll just get at the 0 here. And that would be the same thing. So what's another way of doing it? We're still short 1 solution here, right? So another thing to remember is that A at 0 is the same as star A. Right? So instead of doing this guy at 0, I can just say this guy and then just star it. And have it be equal to j. Okay. So I think kind of looking at this, it's like, okay, like if you just look at this, it looks very confusing, probably. I don't know, does it? but I'm not confused, but hopefully. Why is it that I'm not confused? Well, hopefully you kind of followed my line of thinking, right? So if you think about it as just, forward, then you start thinking about, okay, like, how do I get the second student? For example, this is how I get the second student. And then this is how I get their name. And then if you know that this is how you get the second student and this is how you get their name, well, this is the first character and you can just set it to J. Right? And then I can think about, okay, so this is actually just equivalent to this. Right? And that's just because accessing element of 2 is the same as advancing this address by 2 and then dereferencing. Yeah.
First letter of the name.
Correct. First, yeah. First letter of the second student, of the name of the second student, yeah. Well, third if you're counting from like 0, 1, 2, yeah, at the index 2. All right. So, and I think kind of that's the way to think about it. Like you can try to also think about it backwards, but like especially like if you look at this guy, thinking about it backwards is kind of difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. So I think but if you try to construct it forward, then just like thing by thing. So how do I get the second student? How do I get their name? How do I get the first element of the name? That should be okay, even if it doesn't all fit in your mind all at once. It doesn't in mine. I just do it step by step. Okay. So all right. With that said, let's take the most annoying one, which probably is this guy, and try to reconstruct it back to what's going on. Okay. So I'll copy it over here. I know. So what is P underscore PS? That's the address. So that means that star P underscore PS is the address of the first element of the block of since. And that means that star P underscore PS S plus 2 is the address of the third or like element at index 2 in the block. And then that means that star PPS plus 2 is the student at index 2 in the block. And that means that all of that dot name and then from there on, this should be okay because this is just a string. So we just wrote out the string that corresponds to it. Make sense? Yeah.
So the last line there, that would technically be the address of the first character in the name.
That's exactly right. Yeah. All right. Okay. Okay, so that was 4. Okay, so write a function that takes in a pointer to the first element of a block of addresses of students and changes the name of the student at the index to Jenny. That's essentially the same thing, right? So basically what we want to do is we want to take p underscore ps and we want to change the name. In this case, we want to change the entire name. Okay, so I'll just use one of the ways in which I got at the name of the student at index 2. So I'll just scroll down, sorry about that. And I'll get, for example, this guy. And I'll copy name into it. All right, let me check the score. Okay, that's just Harry. Okay. Okay, maybe. Yeah. All right. Okay, so this is not supposed to make sense, right? The way to make sense of it is you construct it you construct it part by part, and then you just use it. So the reason I just copy and pasted it is I've already constructed this guy. So I've already constructed a way to access the name of the student at index 2 or whatever at index end if what I have is p underscore s. Yes.
So when it says a pointer to a block of students, that would be student star star.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
Because it would be pointing to a pointer.
Yeah. So what I meant is p underscore s. Yeah. All right. So again, like I think it like it looks intimidating. It is, but like it looks intimidating the way a correct answer to a Lin-Alge test question is supposed to look intimidating. If you think about it step by step, as you've experienced, an hour ago, it's all straightforward. So sometimes. No, but like seriously, right? So like think about it as like constructed step by step. Don't try to just like sit down and compose this kind of thing. That would not work. What does work is, yeah, okay, like this is the address of the first element, so this is the address of the element and end, so this is the actual element and end, so this is the name, and that is fine. Make sense? Okay. So, all right. So that is, I think, an answer to your question from before. So what I want to do is I want a block of 10 pointers to students. Okay. So I'm making a new one. So what does it mean? So I want the block of ten addresses rather than 10 students. Okay, so let me do this. So the type is going to be student 22 star star, and this is because this is going to be a block of 10 variables. So that's going to be like this. Let me just write it out and then talk it through. I forgot the name. The name is P block addresses. Okay, so first of all, I want to point out this is so this is also type student 22 star star in the same way that this guy is of type student 22 star star, but they're different, right? So this is just the address of a pointer to a block of students. Here, what I'm storing is not a block of students, it's a block of numbers, each of which corresponds to an address of a student. Okay, so this is why the call to malloc is also different. So here I'm saying I want 10 of those guys. So I want 10 addresses. Here I'm saying I want 5 of the students. So an address is just a number. A student 22 is like an age and a name. Right? So let me write it out. So those are different. Okay, does that make sense so far? So I don't have very many minutes left. So let me just stop doing the exercises and just access those things. So I'll say, okay, let's say that I want to use the student at index 2. So currently there is no student, right? So currently all we have is a block of random numbers, which could be addresses, but currently are not. I could say, so this is the addresses and at index 2. Okay, so what's happening here is malloc finds me a valid address where I can actually store data. Right? So now the student at the address at index 2 is just this, right? So just saying, okay, like this is the address. So this is the student. So the name at that address so that's the same thing. Dot name. So you can think about it as in terms of kind of types, right? So if this is of type star star, then this is of type student star. So that means that this is just of type student. So if this is of type student, that means that you get to go dot name. Make sense? So if I were to just run it, what is the current value of name? Anyone?
Possibly.
Possibly, but possibly anything else as well, right? So it's just nothing. So I allocated the student. So this is a thing that exists, but I did not initialize it. So what I cannot do is so I cannot copy into this currently, but I can do something like this. Oh, actually, like, actually, sorry. Okay, we'll get back to the, I could not do that because it's an array here. So we'll get back to this on Monday. You can actually, you can use strcp1 because it's an array. Okay, sorry. I'll get back to this on Monday. I will see you.